everybody, and welcome back to Car Ski Go. Since you can see that I'm in my Sunday best, it means it's time to work on the car again. Today we're going to be doing a decarbon procedure, which is the Cayman engine is a DFI engine, which means that the fuel is directly injected into the cylinder instead of spraying on the back of the intake valves like on previous generations of engines. And what that fuel spray does is it ends up cleaning the carbon off of the valves. But on a direct injection engine, since there is no fuel washing over the valves, there is no cleaning action. This is very prominent on Volkswagens. I believe the GTI, I think it's the GTI anyway, has this issue. And BMWs, pretty much any kind of direct injection car. It's not considered a major issue on this car, but when I was in there doing cleaning up the intake plenum from the amount of oil that was getting past the AOS, I took a scope, stuck it down there, and there was some, so I figured go through and try to get it out of there. I'm going to be using the zip tie method of doing this. The other method is walnut blasting. We'll get into that a little bit later, but right now I need to get the math off. I need to get the upper plenum off and the inner and the runners off. I already have the cover to the engine taken off already. So I'm going to get this camera mounted up and get a little time lapse going. See you shortly. All right, switching over to the cell phone camera since we've got the runners off of the first side, and let's see if we can take a look down in the combustion chamber and see, or sorry, not the combustion chamber, the intake ports, and see what we see. Honestly, not awful. There's a big lump on the valve stem, not a ton on the valve. Let's take a look over here. Same thing, pretty clean. So it looks like these two ports are closed, which is good. This should be the open one then. Again, not too terrible, but worth a clean. I need to double check that these are closed before I do anything else. But let's go ahead and see what we can do. Alright, first update's coming quicker than I thought. So this was just scraping the inside of the intake chamber and a little bit of the valve stem. You can see how much carbon there is in there, even though it's not super caked like I've seen on some of the Volkswagens. So goal is to scrape and chemically remove as much of this as possible. All right, I've been going at this for a couple hours now and figured it's time for a status update. So in the beginning, I said that there was two real ways to kind of get the carbon off your valves. One is the zip tie method and one is the walnut blasting method. In the zip tie method, you kind of bunch together a bunch of zip ties and you use it as a brush and you shove it into the port and you move it around to try to agitate the carbon off. You usually use a little bit, some kind of chemical in there as well. I'll show you what I'm using in a minute. The other option is the walnut blasting method, where you buy something similar to a media blaster and you shove it down into the port, making sure that all the valves are closed. You put a cover on it and you put a shop vac in there to collect all of the walnuts, and you just blast away and it removes all the carbon. So that setup is good and it's quick. It requires some specialized equipment. You generally need shop air, and then you have a media blaster that if you don't normally blast things, it's just kind of sitting there. So I chose to do the zip tie method, and it is time consuming. It works, but it's time consuming on this car because of the way you have to contort yourself to get to the valves. I think that the zip tie method is a good method if you have access to the valves, and you can probably just lean over the front of the car and get to the engine. But on this car, if I had to do it again, I definitely would just get a media blasting kit and try to share it with one of my friends. So right now I'll show you the tools that I'm using and the progress I've made so far, and I've got 2 ports left that are soaking right now, so we'll kind of give a little bit of a demonstration. All right, so this is the tool. It's a bunch of zip ties put together, and you shove it in the port and you swirl it around and you jostle it. You can attach it to the end of a drill. I'll put a picture of it in here now. And use that. It does get a little bit messy. It tends to get kind of flex and get caught and then jerk and spray the liquid in there all over the place, but it is effective. So let's take it over and I'll show you exactly how I'm doing this. All right, so you can see, I apologize for the shaky video, but there's no place to mount anything. I have 2 of the other ports blocked off. Those are the ports that I've already done before. There is a chemical in there, which I'll show you a little bit later. Essentially, you just take the tool, jam it in there, and slosh it around. And that's that. As far as the chemicals that we're using for this, I'm using a combination of things. One is Berryman B12 Chem Tool. This is kind of like the after part. I use it to spray down the walls of the port after I'm done soaking it and using the zip tie tool on it. But what I'm filling the valves up initially with is this Liquid Moly valve clean. I'm sure there's a lot of different things. You could probably just use Seafoam. This is meant to be diluted and added to gasoline. If you have a non-DFI engine, as the gasoline goes over the back of the valves, this will help to clean it. You can actually see, you know, there you go, dirty clean. So I figured that just putting it right into the port with the valves closed and letting it soak for a couple minutes and agitating it would be a good method. And so far it seems to be working. So let's go over and see if we can see some valves. Okay, the next step in the process is to try to soak up a little bit of the solution that's in the bottom of the port. I do not want to dump this stuff straight into the combustion chamber, so I'm going to take a paper towel and a screwdriver and shove it down one side of the port and let that soak it up. I'm going to get another paper towel, put it on this side of the port, let that soak it up, and then pull it out, and we'll check back in a second. This is what the paper towel looks like after soaking up all the fluid in the port there. Okay, so this is what we're looking at after the valves have been soaked in the Liquid Moly. You can see the port's a lot cleaner. There's still some fluid in the bottom there that I could not suck up with the paper towel. So the way that I am going to, actually what I probably do is go back in here really quickly and agitate again with the zip tie tool. Then And this is not something I can recommend to everybody, but I will stick a shop vac down here with a rag tied around it to kind of seal it into the port there to suck up the remaining bits of loose carbon and little bits of fluid down there. I will say that this is a bit risky because these cleaning agents that we're putting in here are petroleum distillates, which means they are flammable. I have not had a problem yet sucking up small amounts on the other ports, but it is something to be aware of, that you could potentially create a small fire in your vacuum cleaner if you're not careful. So please don't try this at home. I'm just documenting what I am doing. I am not making any recommendations for you to follow the same procedures. After vacuuming, what I don't have video of is going back into the intake ports with some small pieces of rag on the end of a pick and kind of sopping up any little bits of remaining fluid or carbon. Sometimes I'd have to go in and spray the walls down with the Berryman's B12 and then go back in and sop it up. In a couple chambers, you had to do that a couple of times. You just keep repeating the process until it's clean. So what you're looking at right now is just a reminder of what the valves looked like beforehand, and now this is what they look like when you're finished. All right, so it is effective. It is just a little bit time consuming. So I'm pretty happy with those results. I expect a little bit of smoke on startup because I don't think you can necessarily get every single little drop of fluid out, and something might have seeped past a valve that wasn't completely closed. Not super concerned about that. I plan on changing the spark plugs and doing an oil change soon after I take it out for a test drive and let anything that was kind of left over burn off or move wherever it's going to move to. So it's really just a precaution, but it's time for my annual service on the car anyway. So it was good timing for this. All right, I hope that gave you a little bit of insight into what it takes to decarbon a car. On some cars, it'll be much easier. On this car, because of the location of the engine and orientation, it is difficult to get into. But at least you know what it takes now to do it with just some hand tools that you have available at home. All right, everybody, thanks again for watching, and see you next time.